I completely transformed my life and learned how to be in a relationship, first and foremost, with myself. Who wants to be in a relationship with you when you're not even in a relationship with yourself? So I had to learn how to be in a relationship with myself. Who am I? What am I about? What are my thoughts? What are my opinions? What are my interests, area of interest, or hobbies? So I decided, oh, I've got to get to know myself.
Welcome to the MINDTRX podcast with breakthrough ideas to live your best life possible and how to make it happen. I'm Paul Scheele, and today we'll be joined by Millicent St. Millicent St. is a master facilitator and seminar leader, coach, and best-selling author who rocks organizations with positive energy and innovative human development protocols that get results. Her work centers on emotional management and spiritual intelligence, where she fosters individuals' complete responsibility for creating meaningful and beautiful lives and positive change. She has worked as the Master Certifying PhotoReading Instructor for Learning Strategies since 2003. Hello, wonderful Millicent. So good to be with you. Thanks for being a part of the podcast.
Well, thank you, Dr. Scheele. I want you to know that I have been loving the podcast and all of the guest presenters. I mean, I feel like I know these people because I read their books. So we'll talk about reading as a conversation with the author and how I've gotten to know them and the way that they've enriched my life, all of the work that you do. And it is my pleasure to be here with you. Thank you, sir.
Well, it really is a great honor to be with somebody who has spent such a lifetime of devotion to make a difference in the world. I really admire your work. And interestingly, Millicent, I've come to know you a lot better as a result of reading some of the materials that you've sent along. So really good, nice, open-hearted conversation. Let's dig deep because what you have to share is very important in the world today. You call yourself an ambassador of Fortitude, which was a subtitle of a book that you were featured in that Lisa Nichols published. Could you say why that really fits for you?
Well, we've all been through highs and lows, I'll tell you, and some a little more than others. There's all kinds of trials and tribulations. But I like the way you frame it when you say life is not happening to us, it's happening for us. And because you've said that, and I've heard that many times over in the course of your work and the work of others, it helps me to realize that I'm not a victim, that I'm having experiences. I'm a co-creator inside of all these experiences, and that I'm working it out, and that I'm learning, and I'm getting the lessons. And that's really the essence of it. So I am, in fact, an ambassador of fortitude because I've overcome some difficult situations, and I like to spur others on in the midst of their difficulties and challenges as well.
It's really hard to get through our culture to the point of being self-authoring when we realize how much the world loves to keep us in victimhood. And a lot of our work together is about resilience. It's about letting go. It's about not letting the past define us or determine our future. And one of the stories I loved is about you being a runaway from difficult situations at home. You had a couple of siblings and a tough family situation. And when you would run away, you'd run away with a couple pillowcases full of books. Could you describe why that was important for you?
Yes,
For
indeed.
for me, I had a little fishing kit when I pretended I was going to run away. I never had the guts to run away. You did. Please go on.
Yeah, that became a thing. It's like, I'm leaving here, but I'm not going to leave my books. I'll be darned if I leave my books. So, my mother, in spite of the challenges that we had growing up, because many people have had life challenges, and we'll just call it, challenges, but dysfunction inside of family scenarios growing up. I became a chronic runaway. And the first time I ran away, I took two suitcases and I piled my books inside of them. And then I set off on a bus to no particular destination. And I was committed to taking them with me because I had such a connection to them. I felt that they were my friends, they were my teachers and my guides, and I just could not bear to part with them. So I took my very favorites. But as in the course of the journey, the books got heavy, and here I was lugging these books on the bus, and I certainly must have looked like, what kind of situation is this to onlookers? But I realized that I had to let them go. So a little at a time, I'd unload a few here and there on the bus, and then I'd get off and stop and go to a gas station to pee or something like that, and leave a few more here and there. And it was really my first lesson in detachment because I realized I was having an internal dialogue that the books were in me and that the information and the knowledge was in me, and that I could connect to these authors at another time, perhaps at a library because I love the library, and that I could let them go. So it was a very, very powerful lesson for me. My, as I say, first lesson in detachment as a little girl at about 10 years old.
Well, there's an interesting thing that you're referring to. We talk about it in neurolinguistic programming. It's the idea of moving away from, and very often the motivation to make a change is predicated on what you don't want, what you're moving away from. And yet at the same time, even as a 10-year-old with his suitcases full of books, I can just imagine someone picking it up saying, "What do you have in here? Books?" Absolutely. What else would I have?
Yeah.
But there you are, not knowing where the destination might be in the world, but there was a destination for a higher vibration of living that you were receiving. And so, even though you were motivated by moving away from, there was something calling you to a higher vibration, a higher energy. And I'm wondering if you could say what the moral of the story was from those early reads in metaphysics and motivation. What was the message you think kept getting reinforced from these dialogues with authors that you were engaged in?
Oh gosh, thank you so much for asking that. So my mother, in spite of all of our challenges, was an avid reader and would read to us, but she didn't read to us like children's stories. She read heavy, deep, metaphysical, spiritual books, and we loved it. And then she'd quiz us. So we had to pay attention because we were getting quizzed, and we loved it. And so we were attentive. But as time went on, I began to really understand the concepts and the principles. But then I started thinking, I looked around at our life and our lifestyle. I'm like, our life is not lining up with the things this is saying. So how is this working for you? Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
I'm like, come on. And so I understand that the application of the things that we read is really, really important. Joe Dispenza talks about this in his work. He says we have to move from being a philosopher to being an initiate and then move to mastery. So I'm a philosopher. I'm reading the books, and it's all great. And I'm loving the content and the information, but it's just information. Now, as an initiate, I've got to put this stuff into action. I've got to learn how to apply it in my life, take ownership of it, and then move towards mastery. And of course, that's a process that happens over time. And I didn't see that happening with my mother because she was in stuck states. Now I get that now in hindsight. And so that's what I'm able to recognize so easily inside of my coaching practice is when people are in those heavy duty stuck states and they can't figure a way out. Boy, do I recognize that. And I'm able to help them look at it and then reframe what is occurring inside of their experience so that they can make a new choice.
And that's an important part of the work that I came to understand studying adult learning and human development. It's one thing to deliver content, information, but it's another thing to actually have a transformational learning experience that rattles the way in which we're thinking and starts to shift the way we make meaning into the world. And while the exercise of reading these words, and they are inspiring that your mother was giving you, when you recognize that there was a disconnect, I call it that disorienting dilemma, where there is an espoused theory, but there's a theory in use, and the theory in use isn't really getting us where we need to go. So having recognized that, certainly a lot of the work that you've brought into this world is about how do you embody, how do you really live into these ideas and practices. And then also, mastery is about being able to share with those around you. And it helps in embodying of the transformational change. The distinction I make in my research is that there's transformative learning, but then there's transformational change. And that transformational change means we're all in. There's a wonderful story that you tell in that book at the front end. I am right where I need to be. It's a beautiful story about awakening to an idea, or that your best thinking brought you to this disorienting dilemma, right? Your best thinking has created, perhaps unintentionally, has created the current problem, the state or the situation you find yourself in. And what I heard in your story that was so powerful is that you didn't argue about it. You didn't argue with it. You really owned it. Could you say a little bit more about that transformational shift that happened in you?
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much for asking. So, right where I needed to be is a story and also a series of stories that are emerging as it relates to a dark chapter in my life. And my children are from my first marriage. And I'm in my third marriage now, which is absolutely fantastic. But my second marriage was an absolute recipe for disaster. And my husband was a psychiatrist. We had a whirlwind 3 month courtship before we got married. And I didn't know who I was marrying, and I didn't read the fine print, and it all sounded good. And I was married to someone who had severe addictions and was a very violent person. And towards the end of our tumultuous 2.5 year marriage, I wanted out. I just want a divorce. I don't care about anything. I want this to be over with. And it didn't go down like that because he had issues that had nothing to do with me. And I certainly had my own psychosocial issues, but he was threatening murder suicide. And on that fateful night, in the course of the fight, I got the upper hand and took his life in self-defense. But then I got convicted of voluntary manslaughter in spite of all the evidence and police reports and so forth and so on. So I served 4 years, 4.5 years of a 12-year sentence for manslaughter. And I got out and I began to reconstruct my life. Now, I understand that life is happening for me, not to me, and that I participated in that whole drama. And I came to terms with it in terms of looking at what were all the decisions that I made that led me here. And so what happened for me was, in terms of your best thinking led you here, I was attending classes. I would go to any class they offered while I was in jail, also in prison, because those are two different places, but related. So I'd go to anything. I'd go to AA meetings and NA meetings. And in the course of listening at one of the meetings, the facilitator said at the very end of the meeting, in a very loving but non-judgmental voice, she said to all of us, she said, just remember, your best thinking got you here. And Paul, it was like a sledgehammer. Okay, I call it the sledgehammer awakening. It was like my best thinking got. Are you kidding me? So I began inquiry, looking at my thinking, that metacognition, thinking about thinking. It's like my best thinking. I really need to check out my thinking and looking at the decisions that I had made that led up to all of that too, because I had a part to play in it as well. Again, I don't play the victim role. I don't go into justification about what happened. I don't even like to get into the legalities of my case. I focus on what was happening inside of me and taking responsibility for that. And then learning, like, well, what's the lesson in all of this for me? And that's what my focus is.
I want to pause for a moment in this. Maybe you're complete with your story. It's so powerful, and thank you for sharing it. I should give you a little backstory on it. I was attending a workshop at Jack Canfield's event, Breakthrough to Success, and a woman came up to me on one of the breaks and said, "You're Paul Scheele, aren't you?" I said, "Yeah, I am." "Oh, well, I'm Millicent St. Clair's parole officer." And I said, "Parole officer?" I knew nothing about that dark chapter of your life. And there's really no need for me to have known about it. And I figured someday, if it was time for you to just share it with me, that you would. So it's come to light, and it is a powerful story. And I really appreciate that not only that you own it, but that it's helping others, that when they go through the dark night of the soul, when they are in the Cinderella metaphor doing their ashes work, the cinder biter, that dark place in our lifetime where we have to go through it to find out who we truly are. It's a courageous story. I appreciate that you shared it. I hope everybody gets a chance to read about it in your book. In all of that, there is this moment where that statement is made that your best thinking got you here. You had an opportunity to look and say, best thinking, best thinking. I mean, many people don't realize that our biggest problems that we face in our lives at this moment oftentimes are a result of the unintended consequences of the way in which we go about solving our problems. And as Einstein said, unless we change the thinking that created these problems, we're going to just keep reproducing more of the same. So why was it, do you feel, that you were able to really embody that and say, wow, it's time for a shift? Like, how did you internally get to that place of really that profound message?
Oh, wow. Well, first of all of the books that I had read prior to my prison experience have made a difference in my life because, again, those teachings, those voices in my head were always there with me at some level, whether I was listening to them and paying attention to them or not. Those friends, those teachers were always there with me.
Yeah, and I remember you were referring to Science of Mind by Ernest Holmes and A Course in Miracles and owning your experience and all that. So, so powerful. And in my life, Arnold Patent really kicked my butt to embrace these concepts as well, even though I had studied them for years. So I get it. So there was a kind of a readiness where you already had a landing place in your neural net to hear that message.
That's right. The other thing that happened was, so when I got to the prison, I was sitting with a counselor. She says, "All right, where do you want to work?" I said, "Work?" She said, "Yeah, everybody's got to have a job." I'm like, "Well, I don't know. What do you got?" She said, "We got kitchen detail, you got yard maintenance, you can buff floors or library." I said, "Oh, library. I'll take library." She said, "Oh, good." I said, "Well, what's the matter? Is something wrong?" She says, "No, it's just that no one wants it." I said, "I do." So I worked in the prison library and also the prison print shop. And that was my work detail. And I had an opportunity to sit and to read and to think about my life and reflect on my thinking and the choices that I had made, and also to make a commitment to be a part of the solution when I got out going forward. But there was a one book that I read that was so significant. It's a book called We're All Doing Time by a guy named Bo Lozoff and his wife, Sita. So her brother had gotten involved with a drug deal gone bad, went to prison, and they would go to visit him, but they started something called the Prison Ashram Project. And this became a huge thing because they compiled stories and books on meditation, all these practices. Like, what do you do while you're in prison? It's the opportunity to meditate, reflect on your stuff, realizing that we're all adventurers in this great story of life, and they were all doing time. And we have difficulties and challenges, and highs and lows and ups and downs. And sometimes we all have the starring role in our lives, certainly, but sometimes we play the villain, and other times we're an adventurer. And it's just a process of understanding that this is a theater and here we are making choices. And so it led to a place like this. And it's okay. Choose again and get the lessons from it and choose again. And that was such a significant thing for me, that one book. And they send these books out to people free at no charge all over across the United States. If you just write to them and say, "Hey, can I get a free copy of your book?" And they do. So I got my own personal copy after seeing a copy in the library and wrote that thing and still marked it up and I still have it. And that and many other authors made a profound impact on my life.
And were you able to help the prison system to get cool books like the ones that you were reading?
Well, I didn't have to do that per se because we had a pretty good library and we also had law books. So I worked in the law library as well, and I was a law library clerk. They certified me and sent me to a men's prison to get trained along with other men to become a law library clerk. So I was reading legal books and legal cases, helping people to fill out their paperwork and write grievances. So I had quite a job while I was there in prison and I kept busy, but it was all a solution focused experience for me, tutoring other women because there were literacy problems, helping them with their paperwork, guiding them and supporting them, and learning about myself at the same time as well. So I'm like, we're all having this common experience. We all co-created this for ourselves individually and collectively. What am I supposed to do with this? What am I supposed to learn from it? And it was a remarkable experience, actually.
So that's the idea of looking at the arc of your life and thinking, where am I now and where am I going? There's so much that was lifting you up, heading someplace important, which you've arrived at. I totally believe at this time. Certainly in our collaboration, I've recognized that, and in you. And I'm also thinking about Buckminster Fuller, who said, humanity is in its final exam. And I believe we can make it if we recognize that we're here for each other, we're here for our minds. And that's such a great story relative to recognizing you're here for your mind and you're here for the minds of those you serve. And what a beautiful help in someone's travels through this lifetime that they would encounter you in that situation. I'm also thinking about a statement that Buckminster Fuller said that we're all born genius into the world, but we are systematically de-geniused by the time we reach a fifth grade in school. I noticed that in my kids, when they were getting de-geniused, and I had to encourage them along the way to maintain their genius. But this idea of de-geniusing, or what you and I talk about, is the wounded learner. How did you see your healing journey as a wounded learner? And how do you share that healing possibility for those you serve?
Oh God, thank you so much for asking that. So let me tell you quickly how I learned to read. When I was about five or so, I remember going to school and learning to read via phonics. They were sounding out the words and then the compound words and putting them together and so forth. And then someone gave me a pocket Bible. I don't remember who it was. It was almost like a figure that gave me this little pocket Bible. And I took that thing very seriously. So I would sit up late at night when my sister had gone to sleep, and I'd sit next to a nightlight on the floor and cover myself with a blanket and examine this little book. And I'd read the stories of Jesus and so forth, the New Testament and Psalms, you know, those little pocket Bibles. And by the time I was done reading that book, Paul, I could read. And then I'd go to school as I matured. I'd go to school and my hand was always the first up and I was answering questions. And then I had an event where a teacher said, "Stop asking so many questions." There was the first wounding event. Okay. So I'm like, aren't I supposed to ask questions? Because my mother was always asking us questions and we had to answer. So I'm always eager to answer, the hand up in the air, me. So stop asking so many questions. So that kind of shut me down. Another wounding event I had was around mathematics because I came home with a report card, pretty good grades, but not in the area of math. I wasn't thinking about math at all. Words were my thing. And so I was failing in math. I got a whipping that was just unforgettable. And so then I got that feeling thing of like, I'm a math dummy. And I remember when they came out with calculators, and I was like, oh, thank God for calculators. And my message was, I'm not even on the map without a calculator because I'm a math dummy, knowing that I could read well. So I continued with my reading and I excelled with my reading, but not good with math. So I get that there are a number of things that happen to people in the course of living, the wounding events that shut us down. And I also recognize that all of the women that I was in prison with were also wounded learners. They had problems with literacy, they had problems with communication, internal emotional intelligence, lots of things. And I got that. Wow, I can recognize it. And here it is. I'm going to pick up the baton and do what I can to be a part of the solution to educate myself and others.
That's gorgeous. I'm also thinking, Millicent, in those moments where you recognize that there's got to be a better way to educate, there's got to be a better way to do this where punishment isn't associated with it. And I think a lot about shame and humiliation when somebody is at music and music is so exciting and we're supposed to sing and you hit the wrong note and everybody says, okay, you just move your lips. You sit at the back of the choir. We don't even want to hear you sing. And then a person that takes that wound and never develops a voice, which is perfectly capable of learning once it's trained, right? Why should you be able to do math if nobody really showed you how to learn math? So I went through the same thing. I was dumb at algebra, but I was brilliant at geometry. So I said, well, I'm no good at math, except I really love geometry. It's like, here's a child mind trying to reconcile their experience. And it's so often the difference that makes a difference is someone who catches you and says, hey, it's okay. It's okay to not know. It's okay that you haven't had the ability to do something you would like to be able to do. Let's talk about what it means to learn. And to a large extent, we have to be able to also do the healing work around those wounds. And I'm not so sure that just learning to learn is enough. We have to also hold a space where those deeper wounds can be healed. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. And when I got out of prison, I started teaching adult literacy and English as a second language. And I was also teaching inside of some youth detention centers. And that's really where I cut my teeth teaching. I was teaching violence prevention programs. And then I found I was teaching the adult literacy. And one day I was thinking, there has to be a better way. And then the very next day, I get an advertisement in the mail, photo reading, 25,000 words per minute, using the power of your non-conscious mind. I'm like, what? So I ordered the cassette tapes, Paul, and I waited with bated breath for them to come. And when they arrived, I opened them up and I had a Walkman. I put the first cassette in and I was listening to them with the Walkman. And within 5 minutes of listening to you, I said, oh my God, I don't know who this guy is. I'm going to teach this course. This is it. And so I
Oh,
leaned
how
into the home
cool.
study course, but I was still not clear because I hadn't ever seen a model of it. I'm like, what are we supposed to do? So I was trying to do it. I'm like, okay, forget it. I'm just going to go and take the seminar. And so I came to the work and I fell in love with it. Like, oh my God, this. But my question was just, why didn't someone teach me this when I was 5 or 7 or 9 or 10? Why am I just now getting this in my adult years? And you were the first teacher that I ever had that affirmed me, that said, you're naturally brilliant. You have genius ability. You were the first person that I ever heard those words come out of anybody's mouth. And I get that you're speaking into all of us collectively, anybody who would listen to this with the work. And then I got access to other things like the Genius Code and Memory Optimizer. But the one program that really helped me with my own woundedness was Al Siebert's work. So
Mm.
Dr. Siebert's work, The Survivor Personality was his first book, and so it's Resiliency. The whole program that we have on resiliency was absolutely remarkable. That set me free to say, it's okay that I've made mistakes. It's okay that I've had some challenges. It doesn't make me any less lovable. I'm still okay.
And when I first encountered Al Siebert's work, Millicent, it was in an article. I'm not even sure how I got it. It was in the Portland Oregonian magazine in 1984, and it was called The Survivor Personality, and it had a picture of Alan Alda from MASH, on it. And it was, kind of an icon of somebody who, in a difficult situation, goes to humor, right? And makes the best out of the situation that they're in. And that's what he found is that someone, regardless of what it is we go through, if we can bounce back, we become stronger for it. And those people, like Viktor Frankl in the concentration camps, when he wrote about it in Man's Search for Meaning, Al Siebert so embodied what that was about. And when he wrote it in the article, it was the number one most requested reprint article in the history of the Portland Oregonian newspaper. And it was in the Sunday Supplement magazine that it came out. When he came out with his book, I was right in the front line to get it. And one day we got a call, and it was Al Siebert and said, I've been told by a colleague of mine, Bill Harris, that maybe we could do a home study course together. And I was, yes,
What?
yes, yes, let's do it. And I have to say that in 1984, when I first encountered that work, it really shifted my ideas. And the way Al talked about it, he said, we have models of mental illness. And as a psychologist, I was trained how to help people in their mental illness. But what's mental wellness?
Mm.
What is a high level of wellness for us? Where are we headed? And he finally defined it in the survivor personality. And in reading your work, I think that you found that same truth. You found that it is our power to bounce back, to resil, as he says, and to become stronger for it. And now your work really embodies those learnings and makes them accessible to others. So where is it going for you now? What's your like high level expression?
So I've taught in a variety of different communities. I taught for 15 years at Spelman College. It's a women's college here in Atlanta as a part of a summer prep program. And my program was the flagship program, the Let It Go, Move On, let go of the attitudes and the dysfunction and ridiculousness, and let's move on to our higher good where we belong. And then I was teaching them advanced reading strategies, like a modified version of photo reading inside of this program. 15 years, every summer. Phenomenal. I've taught at businesses and government agencies and in local municipalities, women's groups, community-based organizations, correctional facilities, conferences, and so forth. So the bigger picture is really, when I think about violence prevention, because that's how I started out, I was like, I don't want anybody to have to go to prison behind dysfunctional relationships and violence and domestic violence and so forth. Then I morphed into conflict resolution. And then as I came to your work, it was more about, oh, let me resolve the conflicts within myself. Because it's not about me getting along with another or resolving the conflicts with another. It's about me resolving the conflicts in myself. And as I work through my own judgments and my own stuff, then it makes it easier for me to communicate with others because I do so with, as the Buddha says, compassion and understanding.
Yes, you
So,
do.
my work is really about a peace movement, but it's making peace from the inside out, and also using that metaphor, thinking of prison from the inside out. When we get out, how do we show up? What are we doing? What's the new choice that we're going to make? And a lot of people that are walking around here, they look free. There's a lot of people that are inside of little prisons and jails and cells of their own making. And I hear that sometimes when we're on calls, on coaching calls and so forth, the limitations or the doubt, the self-doubt. And I love something that was said just the other day when we were on a call. It's like if you want to dispel doubt, it's like just make a new choice and just go for it. Just go for it. So I want to say that to people that we can heal the wounds. We must. And I love what the terminology that you use. You talk about being a part of a community of learners and a community of practice. Here we are working through ourselves in a group, in a safe and supported, loving environment, and spurring one another on to our higher good.
Mm,
I'm just about, coaching people on an individual basis and group coaching. And the movement is about making peace from the inside out.
that's gorgeous. And there's another piece on that that I would like to get to. I would like to ask a little sidebar in terms of someone who is currently in an abusive situation. One of the things that social workers have said is there's a real danger in forgiving the abuser as a way of finding your own healing. Because what that does is it perpetuates the idea that I was the cause of it. And you weren't the cause of your husband's mental illness. You weren't the cause of his way of being in the world. You weren't the cause of the way that he manipulated you and got you into the situation that you were in. And yet, as a person who's taken 100% responsibility, isn't there that kind of a gray area? And how would you respond to that concern by a social worker if by taking the track that you're doing?
Ooh, okay, so that's a really, really big conversation
Isn't it? Yeah.
about accountability, and there's not an easy answer for that. So I like to say that I take ownership for my part in all of it because it's always, well, what's your part in all that? What are the choices that I made? What was going on with me? I was looking for my safety and security, or looking for love in all the wrong places, or whatever it is. And then there's a whole lot of dynamics as to why people get involved in these kinds of unhealthy relationships. So I can see that from my mother's patterns and so forth, and how that played out in my life. But then the more I became conscious and aware, I made higher and better choices every step along the way, even though that happened. But after it happened, I completely transformed my life and learned how to be in a relationship, first and foremost, with myself. Who
Mm.
wants to be in a relationship with you when you're not even in a relationship with yourself? So I had to learn how to be in a relationship with myself. Who am I? What am I about? What are my thoughts? What are my opinions? What are my interests, area of interest, or hobbies? So I decided, oh, I've got to get to know myself. And the more and more I did that, I self-acceptance, self-love, and I love your self-love paraliminal, by the way. Oh my God. So
Yeah,
all of them, so many of them.
it's
New
the
history
best.
generator, new action generator. There's so many good paraliminals that have helped me to reframe what is going on with me internally. And then I put myself into a position where I was ready to receive and to be in a healthy, constructive, loving, mutual relationship with somebody. And, I have my husband, Gregory, now of 20 years, and it's just been phenomenal because we have no conflict or drama. It's not that we don't have challenges. We do, like every couple does, but it's how we deal with each other with love, with respect and understanding and tenderness to solve the issues and keep it moving so we can go on loving one another. So we have a lot of fun with each other, but there's no easy one answer to that question in this short time frame.
Well, I love the way you positioned it. Certainly, healing our wounded past is a matter of letting it go at some point. One of the best ways to let it go is to bless it, forgive it, and to let it go. And it was a journey for you to get to that place where it could happen. And your let it go, move on concept, which is your website and your book, is a great and simple idea of how important it is to recognize, hey, you're here now. Yeah, all that happened. Let's let go of it because hanging on to it is simply ridiculous. Could you say a little bit more about the term that you use, simply ridiculous? Let it go, move on.
So I wrote a little book called Negativity and Drama Are Simply Ridiculous. And I illustrated a little stick figure. And there are 50 illustrations, and there's just a little bit of writing that goes with each one of these memes. So it's a meme, and a meme is a socially transmitted ideal. So when you see the picture, each one of the pictures, and each one of them is a standalone lesson, by the way, like a finger pointing and blaming and judging, or holding on to the need to be right. Each one of these is a lesson. And it's a fun book that looks at the simply ridiculous attitudes or behaviors that we have internalized that are simply not working for us. They're simply not working. So I never say something is simply ridiculous in a spirit of judgment, I tease and say, okay, that's simply ridiculous because it's not working. And then we look at what is it and how is it playing out in our lives, and then turning it around and then choosing anew. And so I have a lot of fun with that program. And then what we do is we ligmo, Ligmo, which means let it go and move on. Let go of the old and let's move on into the new creation or the new possibilities or to our higher good where we belong, as I like to say. So I have a lot of fun with that work.
Well, it's beautiful. And again, the simplicity of it is sometimes a reason for someone to think it might not be as powerful as it is. But if you really listen to the message, if you really look at it, there are so many thoughts and ideas and beliefs and judgments that we hold on to, so many images from our past that we continue to feel ashamed about years into our adulthood. When are we going to let it go? When are we going to say that it doesn't define us? And I love the way that you position all this work so powerfully. And even though I love continuing to talk with you forever, I know we're going to have to wrap it at some point. I want to give you this purpose statement from your book and ask you to speak to this as kind of our summary of our time together. And thank you so much. This has really been cool. I use heart-rending true stories to help my coaching clients take personal responsibility and face personal hardships. I guide them to detach from shame, suffering, and regret, and empower them to resolve the conflicts within, to make peace with the past, and discover wisdom and meaning from life's most challenging lessons. That's a beautiful way of capturing not only the essence of the book that you're writing, but also a mission statement for your own life. What would you leave with all of us as a key idea of how we might practice and go forward with this kind of an attitude of what's possible?
Oh, wow. So when I read the work of authors like Brene Brown, that talk about letting go of shame and guilt and so forth, it's so significant, it's so powerful, and it's so necessary if we are to move into our natural brilliance and embrace our genius ability. So we've got to let go of the old so that we can then recreate ourselves and reinvent ourselves as the person that we'd like to be. And that's an ongoing process because who we are today is not the same person we were 5 months ago or 5 weeks ago or even 5 days ago. It's a continuous process for all of us. So letting go is a continuous process. And I love the Sedona method too, by the way. So, oh my gosh. So letting go of shame, moving on to into new possibilities. And because I've done so much reading, novels, but lots of human development work and self-help type things, and lots of books on spirituality. That's my thing. Is just the understanding that we're having. I love the way you say we're having a spiritual. We are spiritual beings having a spiritual experience in a human body. I love that. And I like to remind people of that by using stories because I know that people love to hear stories. I don't like to tell tragic stories of what happened in the past. I'm thinking, oh my God, I don't want to write another story about violence and abuse, but I'd like to write stories about my own personal transformation and then use that as a model. And I do in my coaching program to help others look at their stories and then retell it in a way to get the wisdom and the lesson from it. And as you can see right here behind me, there's this beautiful piece of art. And I do nature photography, by the way. So I've got the eye for little things like insects and bees and flowers. And so this one here is a piece that I photographed. And one of my students, I asked my students, I said, well, what is wisdom to you? We know all about the ridiculous, but what's the wisdom that's going to guide you? And this was one of my favorite pieces here. She said, wisdom is braving the fires of life.
Mm.
And I'd like to just leave my the listeners with that by simply saying, we're all going through it. And it's all for our growth and development. And it's okay. It's okay. And I also want to add to your story about the parole officer. When I got out, I was doing speaking engagements, and I was at this one women's group, and there was a woman that kept looking at me all the way in the back of the audience. And after it was over, this woman kept, I felt the energy. She just kept locked onto me. She comes up afterwards, and she waited till almost everyone was gone. And she took my hands and she looked into my eyes and she said, Millicent, I was on your jury.
Oh,
And I was
wow.
like, oh my God. But here's the thing that allowed her to come up. I said in the course of my speaking, I said, I couldn't blame the judge. I couldn't blame the jury. I couldn't blame the DA. I couldn't blame my attorneys, his attorney, him, or anybody. I had to take total responsibility for the things that had happened in my life and the choices that I made that led me there. And when I said that, it freed her. And then she was able to come up and connect with me. And I still have a picture of me, her, and the other women that were at that event because I let her know it's like, it's okay. Because I mean, I got that she probably convicted me too. But there's a whole other conversation about evidence being ruled inadmissible in the legal system. It's very complicated. So these are not simple issues. It's not cut and dry. But when I engage in coaching, I do it in a holistic way. We look at the stories, and I can coach people content free too, by the way, without getting into the story to help them move past their dilemmas using neural and NLP and some other methods. But for those who like to get into the story aspect of it, it's okay. I can do it in a constructive way and then help them reframe things so they get the wisdom and the essence, and that's what builds resiliency.
Oh, so gorgeous. Thank you, Millicent. I'm thinking about braving the fires of life. And, once the fires are over and you're in the ashes and you're biting the cinders, rising from those ashes is really the symbol of resiliency that you have embodied. And then make the path known for those that you serve. So thank you for doing your work in the world. Such a blessing to be able to be in partnership with you around so much of our work in the world with PhotoReading and Abundance for Life. It's my great honor to be able to serve people with you.
It's my pleasure to serve under your leadership and tutelage. And I loved learning always, always have, but I didn't like school. And you were the teacher that freed me to say you can be that authentic, loving teacher. And inside of photo reading, the way I teach the course, I mean, I just lay it on all the way. And the model that you have created is phenomenal. And so your work has brought me to another level of personal liberation, and I love you and I bless you. I appreciate you, Dr. Paul Scheele, and I thank God for you.
Thank you so much, Millicent. And thanks for being here as a part of this.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
All righty. Bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Millicent St. Clair. You can learn more about Millicent at www.millicentstclair.com. And now in the second part of the podcast, it's just you and me. I'll tell you how to use the Paraliminal sessions in the MINDTRX app to easily handle obstacles and move toward the success you want, especially as it relates to Millicent's message. If you're new to the relaxing Paraliminal audio sessions, they use breakthrough technologies to activate your whole mind in only 20 minutes to help improve any area of your life. Let's get going. Welcome to the follow-on to my conversation with Millicent St. Clair and our dialogue around finding resilience and the true genius that is within us. Really enjoy Millicent's work. She's such an amazing teacher. If you ever have an opportunity to be in a classroom with her, it's a real treat. People absolutely adore her teaching style. She's wonderful, isn't she? Well, she's a big fan of paraliminal technology. And of course, that's what we're talking about right now is what paraliminals she might recommend, but also that I would recommend in order to really embody the kinds of things that she was inviting us to consider in our own lives. And I thought about them in four different areas. First of all, it's the idea of being able to let go of past traumatic events. Second is to be able to create a new relationship with yourself. Third is how we can choose to move forward. And finally is mastery, which is, in my estimation, being able to share your wisdom and your gifts with others. So let's break these four down into possible paraliminals that you could use. Now, when I was getting ready for this, Millicent sent me a list of her very favorite paraliminals, so it was easy for me to also think about, yeah, based on our conversation, these are the ones I recommend, and I might have added one or two as well. So let's talk about letting go of past trauma. Certainly she had been through it, and the first one is based on a concept called the Sedona method, which she is a true fan of, Hale Dwoskin's work. And the paraliminal that Hale Dwoskin and I did together is called letting go. And it uses something called the triple welcoming, where we don't resist an idea, but we welcome it, understand it, embrace it, and then move on from it. So letting go paraliminal. The other one is the new history generator paraliminal, where we really do get to see that there are a number of different ways in which our history is replayed by us. And rather than letting our history define us, be able to have some facility of not only changing the way in which we relate to our memories, but being able to learn from them and to be able to let go of any emotional attachment that we may have had to them. So, new history generator. The second area is this idea of creating a new relationship with yourself. And Millicent really has done an amazing job. I hope you get a chance to read her story and also understand that many of us are imprisoned by our own memories of significant events that have taken place in our lives. So how do we change our relationship with ourselves, and how do we really see that our way forward is a way by choice of bringing the best of us for the rest of our lives? So one is called finding yourself, which is a very cool process of going backwards through your history, starting where you are now and going through several developmental stages all the way back to the womb, and coming to an appreciation and understanding of what drives us, what is it that we're truly signed on for in terms of our life purpose, and how we can make the biggest difference in our lives in this time that we have here in the physical human experience. The other paraliminal, and she mentioned it during our conversation, is the self-love paraliminal. And I agree with her. It's spectacular. I mean, I'm not saying that because I wrote it, but let me tell you that I wrote it, I recorded it, and then when I heard the first output from the studio to listen to it, I actually wept. It was so profound. It's an act in which we bring our past self and our future self together with our present self. So you'll hear me say in this podcast, self-love is a very powerful paraliminal, but the depth of that power and the effect that it can have on us is so amazing. Really do encourage you to listen to it. The third area is choosing how to move forward. So we've let go of past events. We have a new relationship with ourselves. So what's on the event horizon for us? Where are we going? And a lot of paraliminals will address this. One that really gets at it in a neat way is recognizing in this present moment, we're always on the threshold of what's possible. And my work with Bill Harris in creating the Fresh Start Paraliminal is really a sweet one. I love coming to it. Every time I'm looking to make a significant change in my own life, that's my go-to because it really does remind me every moment, today, this day, this week, this month, this year, this decade, this century that I'm living into, this moment right here, this is an opportunity for a fresh start. The next one is called belief, which allows us to not only rewrite negative beliefs that we may be holding on to, but then construct and install a positive self-enhancing belief that will allow us to do our best work going forward. And the third one, perfect health. Interestingly, it was one that Millicent recommended. When she sent that to me, I thought, perfect health, perfect health. I love perfect health for a lot of reasons, but I always think of that in terms of something's not right. Perfect health, though, it really does make sense in terms of choosing how we move forward, our relationship with our physical body, with our being, and understanding that we are energetic beings and we can work with those energies so that our best days happen every single day. Health and well-being. Well-being is connected to the concept of wealth as well. So our high-level well-being is possible as we focus and direct our energy toward that end. The fourth area is the idea of mastery. All of us are attaining levels of mastery in those things that we find most meaningful to us, our purpose for engaging in those things that we're most passionate about. So I put it in the context of mastery, as she put it, but then I added, that's where we are sharing our wisdom with others. So there are two paraliminals that really help us do that. Oh, by the way, when I work with people in my inner circle, oftentimes I'll see a trajectory over a period of several years. The first year we're working on ourselves. Second year we're really sharing ourselves with others and the wisdom and the ideas that we have come to. And the third year is when we really do our legacy work, where we're making our biggest contribution to the world. So this idea of sharing your wisdom, sharing the good ideas that you've gotten from this podcast with others, giving them links, helping them listen to Paraliminals as well. Important because you're recognizing what's working for you. And by nature, you want to be able to share that with others because it's made a difference for you. It probably can in the areas of people's lives where you have shared similar situations or challenges and you have overcome. Why not share resources that will help them overcome that as well? So the first paraliminal is called Talking to Win, where we recognize that we have a message to share and let's be able to share it from our heart in a way that people can easily receive it. And the second paraliminal is called You Deserve It. It's a paraliminal that I did with Lisa Nichols, who was the author of the book that featured Millicent St. in it. That is where she took on that title of an ambassador of Fortitude. Talking to Win, You Deserve It. And this will really help you bring your great work to the world. We need everyone to show up. It's all hands on deck for humanity these days. We need us to all show up and show up big. Bring our gifts to the world. Thanks so much for listening. Pleasure to be with you. See you again soon. Thank you for joining me today. I applaud your willingness to maximize your potential. You can easily use the Paraliminal audio sessions in the MINDTRX app to stimulate your non-conscious mind, that is your inner mind, to reduce any resistance in your life and to propel you toward the success you want. Go to www.mindtrx.com/go. These amazing audio tools have helped millions, and I encourage you to bring them into your world today. Be sure to be back for more episodes of the MINDTRX podcast. You'll find insightful conversations with authors, experts, and thought leaders, all devoted to improving your life's experience. Thank you again for being here on our MINDTRX podcast.